Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. Madam Clerk, we have regrets from Councillor Giddings and Councillor Longo. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest, Council? Madam Clerk, there are none. Council, we have the Standing Committee report from the Budget Committee while we're in Council from June 24th. Could I have a mover and seconder for their report? Councillor Adams and Councillor Chisholm, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, the report is approved. We now need a mover and a seconder to resolve into Committee of the Whole. Councillor Lischina, Councillor Elgar, all those in favor? And that carries. The first item in our Committee of the Whole meeting is the subdivision agreement. It's a consent item for Coronation Drive subdivision. That's the Menkes Glen Ashton Estates, Inc. And the report is from the Development Engineering Department. And it's moved by one of you, Councillor Adams, or questions?
I'm happy to move it. I'm also happy to thank our staff for the efforts that they put into organizing the details behind this.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just read the recommendation for the benefit of the public. The motion is moved by Councillor Adams that a subdivision agreement between the town and Menkes Glen Ashton Estates, Inc. be finalized in accordance with the standard agreement format, that the town solicitor be authorized to make minor changes which do not affect the substance of the agreement, that the agreement be executed in accordance with bylaw 2013-57. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that consent item is consented to. The second consent item is the assumption of the stormwater management pond in Plan 20M 1114 Timson Phase 1, and this recommendation is that bylaw 2019-70, a bylaw to assume the stormwater management pond within Plan 20M 1114 be approved. A mover for this would be welcome. Councillor Robertson, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any. That consent item is also approved. You have a confidential consent item, Council. The proposed Halton District School Board Secondary School, Neagaiwa Boulevard and Dundas Street West. You have a confidential report from the Commissioner of Community Development, and we need a public motion per the advice of our town solicitor, that someone move that staff be authorized to proceed as set out in the confidential report of the Commissioner of Community Development dated June 24th, 2019. Councillor Elgar?
No, sorry. I was on C3. I was at the appropriate time. I'd like to go in camera on that one.
How about on C1?
C1? I'm fine. Well, it's a Ward 7 issue, so I'll let them.
All right. Councillor Sandy.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Could I make the suggestion before we kind of go through all this? Obviously, I'll be happy to kind of go in camera. I have one question for staff on C1, but to move the confidential consent items maybe to the end of the agenda so that we can help the public?
Well, it was staff's expectation that they only list as consent items things they couldn't imagine you having problems or questions about. So, but yes, I can certainly move all of the confidential items to the end of the agenda. And if everybody's okay with that, we'll move to discussion item, which is item number 3 on the agenda. And that's bylaw 2019-74, the amendment to the Town of Oakville sign bylaw. And we have a presentation from Selena Campbell, the Manager of Enforcement Services. Ms. Campbell, welcome, and Council looks forward to your presentation.
It's not on? How's that? Perfect. I'm here to speak to item 3 on tonight's agenda regarding the placement of fascia signs at 515 Dundas Street West with a proposed amendment to the sign bylaw. So in the past, adjustments could only be achieved through a one-size-fits-all variance process. Since the new sign bylaw came into effect on January 1st, 2019, there have been 3 possible avenues to seek an adjustment. The first is an exception, which would allow for a minor change to the bylaw and is granted by the designated official. This option allows customers to apply for up to a 10% increase in sign face area or height. The designated official will then review the request based on criteria set in the bylaw and may approve or deny the request. The second option is an appeal. This process would be heard by the town's appeals committee. a customer who has applied for an exception and been denied, or who has requested or whose request exceeds the authority of the designated official can make an application for an appeal. The appeal committee is not allowed to hear requests for prohibited signs, signs not expressly identified in the bylaw, electronic message boards other than on a ground sign, or an increase in sign face area of advertising signs. If neither of these two options apply, the third option is an amendment. This considers changes to the bylaw that cannot be dealt with through an exception or an appeal process, and must be considered as a site-specific or sign-specific modification to the bylaw. Recommendations are then brought forward in the form of a report to council for consideration. A sign application was received on January 31st, 2019 by North American Sign on behalf of AAA Green Light Driving School and Big Oakville. Upon review, staff identified that the signs were placed on the second story and were over the maximum allowed height. As a result, the application was denied on February 20th, 2019. In order to seek an adjustment, the applicant properly submitted a request for site-specific amendment to the bylaw. So key facts in this application are that it is mixed-use urban core designation, that section 5.3.1 of the sign bylaw restricts the height of a fascia sign on this building to a maximum of 4.5 meters. Existing signs on the building complied with the previous bylaw. The current bylaw prohibits the placement of signs on the second story of this building, and proposed signs are 4.2 and 4.66 meters above the maximum allowable height. Public notice was completed with no comments received, and it was considered as an amendment due to the fact that it is a site-specific request. So in reviewing this application, staff noted that the fascia sign request on this property is compatible with urban design guidelines for the surrounding area, that surrounding residential uses will not be negatively impacted. The design of this building accommodates occupancy of commercial tenants on both the first and second stories, and that they may have individual signage needs, and that fascia signs any fascia sign displayed is still restricted to the wall space to which the business occupies, and that the applicant provided all required information with their submission for an amendment to this bylaw. As such, staff are recommending that the amendment be approved. The recommendation is before you, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Campbell. Council, do you have questions? Councillor Elgar.
So I thank you for bringing this forward. So what you can confirm is that the signs at this height do not impact any residential properties around.
That is correct. The building doesn't face the residential area on either side, either the interior or exterior elevations.
So, which understanding is your logic you used for this, so it doesn't impact. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Lischina.
Selena, can you just clarify, so you said there's, signs are not allowed on the second floor, and so are there any other signs there? Is this the first, so otherwise, if we approve this, then everybody can put a sign on the second floor?
Through you, Your Worship, there are currently signs on the second story that were approved before the passage of the new bylaw, so this would really allow them to continue that practice.
So is that also an issue with the bylaw itself, that we would need to go back and clarify that section? Or how does that get impacted, if at all?
Again, through you, Your Worship, being that this is a site-specific amendment, any future applications with this building would be permitted to have that second story elevation sign.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick question. Knowing the design of these buildings coming online, will this be an accepted, I know it's site-specific, but knowing if we do approve this, do we set precedent with respect to second-story signs on new development going down on, say, in Dundas or somewhere else?
Through Your Worship, it certainly would be a consideration in future requests that come through. However, every site is individual, and it would depend on the impacts. It would depend on the urban design guidelines and any impacts on residential properties. So it would have to meet the criteria set out within the bylaw.
So the suggestion is not one size fits all. Thank you.
That's right.
Councillor Haslett-Dale.
Could you just clarify for me the size of the current sign on the second story? So you mentioned that there are signs on the second story now. What are their size?
Through your worship, I'd have to get back to you on the size of those signs, but it is my understanding that they all fit within the sign size requirement. It's just the height that was out.
Okay, so is it correct that they're above the 4.5? What would be the total mass of the sign that they could put on this second story?
Through your worship, the size, so the height altogether is, one is 4.66 meters over the maximum of 4.5, but that speaks to the overall height of the sign rather than the size of the sign. The sign face area does comply with the regulations.
Okay, so I might be a little bit slow tonight. So we're at 4.5, which is what you're allowed. Are they going 4.2 above the 4.5 for a total of 8.74 in terms of height?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct.
Okay, and so the current sign is around 8 in height?
At this time, there isn't a sign at that location, but there are other signs on that building at that height.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chisholm.
My apologies, through you, your worship. The way I'm reading this, and maybe it's, you're saying 4.66 meters, and it's 4.5. So I'm just taking the difference between 6.66 and 0.5. So it's not. So it's another 4.66 on top of that. Is that correct?
Through you, your worship, that is correct. The maximum allowable height at the 4.5 meters restricts any signage to the first story. What we're doing is allowing them to extend to the second story of this building because there are tenants on that second story, commercial tenants, that require signage.
Thank you.
Councillor Elgar.
Just further to my question regarding shining anything onto residential. So if I look at the picture on page 77 of a report, so there's no signage allowed on the section of 16 Mile Creek that backs onto it. Is that part of the address? Is the address the one big square that's owned by Green Park here? Because that whole thing is all Green Park development, from what I recall back in early 2000. And I'm just trying to figure out if anybody on the north side of 16 Mile Creek actually has the possibility of having signs on those buildings on the south side of 16 Mile Creek.
Through your worship, the building that we're looking at is the building C, which is abutting Niagawa Boulevard. It's restricted to that single building,
But I saw, and the signage is on the inside, correct?
interior and exterior.
Interior. And that is the only one that is 515 in this complex? Like, I just want that we know that 515 is one building. All these buildings have different numbers?
Through your worship, it would be restricted to building C within the address of 515 Dundas.
So it doesn't say, it's just when I look at the location, so it's 515 Dundas Street West, Building C only. Are we being that restrictive?
Through your worship, the idea is that, yes, it is, and the applicant has actually requested that it be building C. So we're going with their recommendation.
Okay, so there's no way that building A or B or D has a grandfathered right at this 515 address at all?
At this time, the request is strictly for building C.
Very good. Yeah, because that was the biggest concern. A residential looking at that, it wouldn't be very good. Thank you.
Councillor Sandu.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I thought I'd give council a little bit of background knowledge. If you haven't gone up to the Fortinos Plaza lately, there actually is a lot of second-story signage that's already available there. This particular location, I can't remember exactly where it is in the drawing, but think about when you go up there where you see where the OMAC sign is, and we're thinking about, I think in the back corner, the last part to be developed. There is some, to answer Councillor Elgar's comment or question, There is some signage on 16 Mile Drive, but it's not backlit right now. So there's an overhang from Altum Health, and I think there's a new restaurant that's there. It's called Bonanza. They also have an overhang in the back. There is second-story signage that you'll see on Dundas facing out to the road, where that's already currently there. But the internal part of the complex, there's only a couple of signs. So large sign for OMAC, like I mentioned, and a couple of other smaller buildings or smaller businesses. So this seems to be acceptable and in congruence with the rest of the plaza.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there members of the public with information for council on this file? I'll restrict it to table and look for a motion. Sorry, sir. Well, please come down and introduce yourself, and we look forward to your information.
So my name is Joseph Calderon. I represent the owner. I'm the agent for the owner. So I just wanted to show pictures of the second floor signage for some of the existing tenants. And one of the conditions of the leases was that they were permitted second floor signs, and we're restricting it just to white signage, just as you see it. So it doesn't have any impact.
Councillor Chisholm.
Just for clarity, it's not backlit, it's just a white sign?
It's a white sign.
It's backlit?
It's illuminated, I believe,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay. That was for 43.
Thank you for your information.
Okay.
Anyone else? Well then, I'll look for a motion. Councillor Sanju is moving the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Thank you, everybody. Let's turn to item number 4, the Economic Development Strategy. And this is a presentation from Dorothy St. George, our Director of Economic Development. And Director, we're looking forward to this new plan.
There we go. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Burton. Good evening, members of council. The Economic Development Strategy report before you is for approval this evening. And it was 10 years ago that we first brought our existing economic development strategy before you. Since that time, great things have been happening in Oakville's economy. We have new companies, new jobs, new connections, and lots of new investment. The strategy before you for 2019 to 2024 builds on the foundation of the 2009 plan. It aims to further strengthen and diversify the Oakville economy over the next 5 years. It represents a culmination of research, consultation, and analysis, and it aligns with Council's priority in its strategic plan to promote and support actions that will maintain a resilient local economy. The document that you see before you on screen is also available for handout. It contains the salient points from the strategy report before you and is for public viewing. And what you don't have in your report, what you'll find on the last page of this document for handout, is recognition of all the different organizations and companies that were involved in the development of the strategy. The process for the development of the strategy involved considerable consultation, and we brought the draft strategy to you, as you'll recall, in April of this year. And since that time, we've undertaken a lot of further consultation. It's been online. We've had feedback through our phone, email, and in person. We held a public open house in May, and we made presentations to the Oakville Chamber of Commerce, their board, and Government Relations Committee. Here's some of the comments that we heard through that feedback, or through the consultation. Chamber gave it a thumbs up. The Chamber president talked about the strategy supporting existing businesses and promoting the long-term health of the economy. Sheridan College is looking for us to help them with partnerships on applied research in the business community. And we also heard from the Excellence in Manufacturing Consortium. A few issues emerged as opportunities for further consideration, which have been addressed in the final strategy before you, and that includes emerging technologies, talent, cost pressures, and defining economic development. The vision for the strategy is simple. Oakville is a community where companies want to be. We know that Oakville is an attractive location for business. Consider its environment. It's the best place to live in Canada. Has an excellent location and good transportation network. We have an abundant supply of talent here, and we're cost competitive. These factors have brought lots of new investment to the community, and we've seen existing businesses grow and expand. To make sure that this continues into the future, it requires us to be proactive and engaged with the business community. There are three major goals for the strategy. Attracting new investment. That involves marketing, servicing new investment leads, making sure we have an adequate supply of shovel-ready land. Through the consultation, we know that businesses, developers want to see a reduction in red tape for development approvals. And our residents want us to attract new companies to create more jobs for local residents. The second goal is to grow the local economy. We'll have a robust corporate visitation program to go out and meet and understand the needs of the business community. This is all about business, retention, and expansion. And much of the growth of the economy comes from retention and expansion of our existing businesses. The third goal, which was not in our 2009 strategy, relates to our commercial districts. We know that there is a small business center at Halton Region, and we have 3 BIA boards and staff that manage those areas. Where we can help is with the mitigation for downtown, with our digital Main Street Service Squad, providing one-on-one assistance to businesses, and providing information for potential investors, such as the toolkit that was developed for investors in each of the 3 commercial districts. The initiatives for each of these goals are detailed in the document before you. These are the major results we want to see through the implementation of the strategy. Annual job growth will be higher than the regional average. We want to see more growth in the knowledge-based sectors. We're going to see greater commercial and industrial development. And Oakville will have an improved reputation for business friendliness, due in large part to reduced timelines and greater transparency of development approvals. We want to make sure we have adequate shovel-ready land for new development. Our Brownfield Community Improvement Plan, which was introduced this year, will yield new private sector investment, and we'll have more partnerships on applied research between our companies and Sheridan College. In closing, I'd like to just read a quote from the feedback we received from the Joshua Creeks Residents Association. This is from their president. It says, "We support your strategy for the following reasons. It focuses on improving Oakville's economy. It addresses the challenges and barriers to business investment identified by economic stakeholders. It does not duplicate existing efforts and programs of other strategic partners. It recognizes support for Oakville's BIAs needed over the short term. We also agree that giving priority and focus to economic development is a significant factor in developing and maintaining a vibrant and healthy community for residents, as well as for businesses, and are pleased that economic development is a town priority." And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Director, and a good report it is. Are there questions? Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the presentation, Dorothy. And sorry, I believe it's page 18 of the report where you discuss talent, and I just don't see the Halton Industry Education Council represented in there. Did you reach out to them, or were they a part of the stakeholder group?
They weren't, they were not involved or didn't provide feedback, but certainly they are a key player in economic development and would be involved in talent.
Yeah, I just hope we keep them in mind. They're doing some pretty great things with their employer registry and their advanced skill trades connections and apprentice search and linking a lot of key businesses together with what the needs of the young people going into that are. So if we could just keep in mind to reach out to them and ensure that they have some input, because they've got a lot of data and labor force data as well that they've been compiling over the past years. My second question relates to, and I believe it's page 21, how we measure success. And we've heard a few times about the customer relationship management system and how can we serve business better, I think. And I think, some of us have heard, a business comes in for an application and they're told they have to wait and get a fire sign off, and then they come back and then they're told we have to go to zoning, and then they're told, no, you have to go to permitting, and then they have to go and talk with planning about, and that's where the frustration derives. So what mechanisms through this strategic plan are we going to put in place internally to try and alleviate those pressures?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the best route into town hall, and we've said this in the past, is through economic development for businesses, because we can provide that pre-consultation. When someone has an idea, they want to move forward, they need to know who to talk to. We can bring together the appropriate staff and have that early discussion before you get into the formalized pre-consultation process. I think that's the best route forward.
I agree, it's the best way forward. I guess what I would be asking, and maybe Commissioner Closey or in the senior executive team could answer, are we committed to doing that, though? I guess that's the question I'm asking.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would add to what Dorothy has said. Certainly the best place to come in is through economic development, but we also have a very, I would say, large-scale program underway right now. We've labeled it Planet. And it's trying to determine in all the development approval processes how we can streamline them, link them together. So when any customer comes into the town to do a project, we understand that as a one project, and we can link all the permit processes, the planning processes, development processes together to streamline them as quickly as possible. A big part of that is moving to an online system, which we're in the process of investigating, so we can move that forward in future years.
It's the best possible answer I could have expected. Thank you very much. You're doing great work, guys. I appreciate it.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. It's good to hear that PLANET acronym. I guess that's one of the issues and challenge we have is, and I think I did mention the last time, Dorothy, you were here at council with respect to the approval process, and that it's intertwined with the residential, and hopefully there's some logic in separating them, and hopefully we can have a better streamlined process. However, I'm not getting in the weeds, but that's one of the biggest concerns, because when I read the report, that seems to be the main theme that came out many times in your report with respect to the approval process, the internal processes with the town. I would suggest if that's it, we work on that one right away, and it'll probably resolve some of your other challenge or help your other challenges move forward in that respect. And I echo Councillor O'Meara's comments too. Thanks very much, and good report. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Burton, we've definitely involved both the businesses and development community in the Planet program. Economic development staff have been sitting in on those meetings as well and providing that business perspective. If I were to say there's one thing that businesses would like most, it's certainty. It's certainty about timing, it's transparency. Yes, they'd like reduced timelines, but more important than that, they want some certainty around the timeline. Whether it's going to be 3 months or a year, if they knew that up front, they can make their plans accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Haslett-Neal.
Thank you very much for the report, and it's incredibly well written. It was very informative. I mentioned to you I would have a couple questions, and you answered in large part in your presentation most of it. Can you just reiterate a little bit about what you mean by ensuring infrastructure is built to support business needs? What role will economic development have in ensuring that infrastructure is being built?
Well, through Mayor Burton, there's a couple of things. Shovel-ready land is important. So being at the table and having the discussions with our Community Development Commission about ensuring that the hard infrastructure is put in place so that we can respond to new investment. The other type of infrastructure is about technology, so smart technologies. Are we planning for the future needs? There's so many changes happening and emerging technologies that are coming forward. Through our corporate visitation program, we're learning more about the needs of the business community and making sure that we're forward-thinking in bringing in those technologies. So some of the smart technologies will be coming in through the Lakeshore Road Streetscape project. And we need to continue to have that dialogue with business.
Okay, thank you for that. And a further question about downtown. So I appreciate what you talked about in terms of the toolkit and information packages for possible investors. Is there any additional work that will be done for downtown to address and bring office street traffic to downtown? It's probably the number one issue we hear, not just in my ward, but in other wards around how are we going, we're going to make it beautiful, but what are we doing to bring long-term business downtown? Is there a role or a greater role than the information packages that you're suggesting or can support?
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes, I believe there is. There are, I would say, 3 phases to for the future of downtown. We're in the first phase, which is the construction and the redevelopment of the streetscape. And our role in that is the implementation of the mitigation strategy, which was approved by council, as well as the digital service squad providing that one-on-one business assistance. The second phase is transition. So as the construction is completed and we move, we'll be partnering with the BIA. They're doing marketing and events to bring new people or bring residents and visitors to the downtown area. That's where that toolkit comes into play. So it provides information for new investors to fill those vacant spots. The third phase, and I think this is probably where you're going, is looking at what are the constraints, and we can play a role by bringing together the developers, the realtors who are dealing in that retail environment, and understand the constraints that may be barriers to bring new office development to our commercial districts. It could be building heights, it could be dedicated parking, and so forth. So that's understanding what those constraints are, working with our planning group on policies for bringing office development in the area. The other component is really the town-owned assets. When you think about where you actually could put new office development, Oakville, the town of Oakville has large land holdings in our commercial districts. So looking at the long-term plans and working with other staff in departments, we can look at those needs and opportunities.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. It was an excellent report.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone in the public with information for council on this matter? Councillor O'Meara?
Happy to move, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. May I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is adopted. Thank you very much, Director. Council, the next item is the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee minutes and recommendation. And the motion is that the recommendation be approved and the remainder of the minutes be received. Councillor Duddick is moving that. Is there discussion? May I put the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried and approved. Now, we're going to go back to confidential consent items. So let me understand, do we need to go into camera for all 3 of these, or what's the desire here? Councillor Elgin.
C3, I would like to go in camera on.
And C2 from Councillor O'Meara. Anyone else? C1? Is it a question that requires being in closed session? Very well then. One of you is moving that council proceed to meet in a session closed to the public because the subject matter being considered is the security of the property of the municipality or local board with regard to C1, and possibly advice subject to solicitor-client privilege, I would guess and suggest on C1. On C2, the same. And on C3, the same, or at least the second, advice subject to solicitor-client privilege. I need a mover for that. Councillor Elgar moves that. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And Madam Clerk, you'll now arrange the chamber for a meeting closed to the public.
I think it's a.
All right, I'm calling the public session back into order. Council has met in a session closed to the public in accordance with the Municipal Act in order to consider items C1, C2, and C3, where in C1, the permissions required for meeting in camera, or the security of the property of the municipality or local board, and advice subject to solicitor-client privilege, and in C2 and C3, advice subject to solicitor-client privilege. And the chair is now looking for a public motion, as advised by the solicitor, that staff be authorized to proceed as set out in the confidential report of the Commissioner of Community Development dated June 24th with regard to item C1. Is there such a motion? Councillor Knoll. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. We now need a mover for the motion for C2. And Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Robertson moves it. The motion is as presented in the agenda. All those in favor? And that carries. And I can now say that the motion can be made public as per the advice of the solicitor. And that motion was that the proposed settlement of the cash in lieu of parkland valuation dispute with Brawny Property Holdings, the old Brawny Mall site, respecting the residential component of the redevelopment, as recommended in the confidential report of the legal department, be approved. And that now has carried. On C3, we need a motion to direct the solicitor to, the motion is that the solicitor be instructed as set out in the confidential report of the legal department dated June 18th. Councillor Elgar, or?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's not mine.
Look at Counselor.
Councillor Chisholm has stepped forward as, and all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries also. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Councillor Elgar. Council, we need a motion to rise and report to council. Councillor Grant, thank you for that. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. I rise and report that the Committee of the Whole has met and has made recommendations on consent items 1 and 2, confidential consent items C1, C2, and C3, discussion items 3 and 4, and advisory committee minutes item 5, as noted by the clerk. Is there a mover and seconder for my report? Councillor Parmar, thank you, and Councillor Elgar, thank you. I think I saw your hand. The motion is that the report and recommendations of the Committee of the Whole be approved. All those in favor? Any against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Is there any new business of an emergency, congratulatory, or condolence nature? Councillor Duddick.
Just wanted to wish an early happy birthday to our colleague across the floor. I understand it's his birthday tomorrow. Happy birthday, Councillor Adams.
Thank you. I would like to, under this heading, offer my congratulations to the volunteers and the residents of Ward 7 and the 2 councillors for Ward 7 for a very, very successful fun fair in Isaac Park, which I greatly enjoyed. And I saw, I mean, it was amazing. We were ducking in and out of rain, and you bracketed yourselves perfectly. Nobody, it rained just before it was supposed to start, and nobody lost heart or courage. People stayed, and it was a great time. So well done. I understand it's the second one you've done? Second or third?
Second one, it's the first one we've been involved in.
Yeah. So, and I guess I helped sponsor it too, didn't I? But anyway, anyway, it's a good time for all. So thank you, everybody. I would now call for a mover and seconder for the consideration and reading of the bylaws. Councillor Lischina and Councillor Robertson, thank you. And this is for the bylaws as listed in the agenda, 2019-70, the 74, 76, and 81, the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the meeting of council. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The bylaws are adopted. That completes our agenda, and I want to thank everybody for your time and attention and your good questions, and we are adjourned.